Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, the first part thereof for the 5th of August 2025. I'm up early, very early today, so I'm getting this done as soon as I can. Well, actually, not as soon as I can. I just released a US politics extra if you want to go and check that out as well. Okay, so we have an uptick in personnel lost for the Russians, and quite a big one, really. I mean, we haven't been over 1,100 for a good few days or weeks. 1,120 personnel lost is significant. 2 tanks, 12 troop carrying AFVs, so that's a slight uptick in that category. 28 artillery systems, that's a snip above the daily average, and 93 vehicles and fuel tanks, edging towards the 100 threshold there. So a mixed bag for the statistics, but certainly slightly heavier losses for the Russians, and that might have something to do with which is going on in Sumy. So the Kiev Independent reports that over 330 Russian troops have been killed in a failed attack on Sumy Oblast. Ukraine's intelligence has claimed, and they show footage as well to support that. HUO, the GUR Special Forces, fought off a Russian attempt to advance in Sumy Oblast, quote, destroying more than 8 Russian companies during the battle, the intelligence agency said. That is a significant claim it's and set of events by the looks of it. I've actually seen this video. To be honest, this is the Timur Special Forces, I think, group. The video is here, just here. No, here, no, here, no, here. It is down here somewhere anyway, because I've just watched it. No, it's not there at all, is it? Basically, there is a video. I swear it is here. It's just above. There, it's that one. So, warriors from the Timur Special Unit of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine thwarted a Russian advance in Sumy region. During the operation, our defenders managed to infiltrate behind enemy lines, clear out Russian positions, and establish foothold, says Anton Gerashenko. The Russian advance has been halted, and the supply of food and ammunition to their military group has been disrupted. According to the intercepted radio communications, Russian soldiers refused to storm positions within the responsibility zone of the Timur Special Unit, making up excuses to avoid the assault. Total Russian losses at least 334 killed and over 550 wounded. Glory. So that is what the Ukrainians are claiming, and they use that video to support the claim. It's certainly interesting video, that one. But I don't know that you can use that video to confirm the actual details, but the Ukrainians are claiming 334 killed, 550 wounded up in the Sumy area, which is pretty incredible. Russian forces entered Sumy Oblast earlier this year, as we know, to create this sort of buffer zone. During a recent engagement, soldiers of Timur Special Unit moved behind Russian lines and cleared out Russian positions, and did that disruption that we've heard about. Um, and yeah, so that seems to be good news for the Ukrainians in that area. That's one of the areas of better news for the Ukrainians, let's face it. Also Kamyanska, I don't know if I've got it on the map here. Yeah, so Kamyanska down here next to that reservoir. You probably can't see my face in the way, but anyway, just up there, just there will that's where the Ukrainians are countering at the moment, and they're also doing quite well at countering in Sumy too. Now we hear that a senior Russian officer was reportedly killed by his own men after boasting that he would be promoted for sending them to die in assaults, and declaring that he would bring funeral notices to their families and F their wives. He allegedly profited from their deaths. Well, it sounds like he got what was coming to him. In November 2024, the Russian army announced that Colonel Yevgeny Borisovich Ladnov had died near Luhansk and near Crimea as a result of artillery shelling on the 10th of November 2024. He was the commander of the 19th Tank Regiment. A man who served under him, Junior Sergeant Andrei Mikhailovich, oh goodness, Perevoschivkov, something like that, was gave an account of what he says happened to the colonel. According to him, Ladnov was deliberately sending his men to their deaths en masse and told them so in blunt terms. He gathered the stormtroopers and said, "What the F? You effing stormtroopers, why are you still alive, you effing bastards? The more of you there are, the more stars I get on my epaulets and medals. You are not meat. You are you are not meat to me. You are just a number. Goodness me, it's like you're not even meat. You're a number, let alone being a human. I have destroyed 2 assault regiments, and by autumn I will destroy you, and I will deliver the death notices to your wives, and I will F your wives. A similar account was given by a female military doctor in May 2024, and there's a thread on that one. She says that while she was serving with the regiment, she saw that the commanders quite simply got rid of unwanted servicemen. They took off their armor, threw grenades at them in the dugout. Why? Wow. The regiment commander shot them himself. His henchmen shot them. The regiment commander and his henchmen, of course, had already destroyed 2 regiments before mine, so to speak. The one I was in, the 19th Regiment. She says the senior officers stole the salaries of the men they were sending to their deaths and worked out in advance who was worth the most money if they died. I saw documents in the office of Tobol, the chief of staff, about, God forgive me, how much each serviceman costs. That is, the guys were simply sold, like football players were sold, simply for slaughter. They didn't take the wounded from the battlefield. They rotted and died there so that they wouldn't have to pay again for the wounds. The guys were listed as missing in action, and the payroll was distributed between the command, between Ladnov, and again his lackeys. She calls Ladnov, quote, the butcher commander, the murderer commander, and says that she was invited to become his field wife, sexual accessory, but refused. As a result of the unit's continued lawlessness, the doctor says she had to desert. A month before his death, Ladnov was reported to have personally ordered the execution of 7 of his men who had refused orders. According to the senior intelligence officer of the regiment, on Ladnov's orders, the men were taken by his subordinates into the neighboring forest belt with armor, without armor, without weapons, and gave each of them a burst in the chest, point blank. A few weeks later, Ladnov was killed allegedly by his men, according to Perevoshchikov's account. He sustained a leg injury and was transferred to a separate anti-aircraft missile division where he worked to counter Ukrainian drones. However, he says his work was not recognized and his kills were falsely claimed by others. He says that awards are received by individual soldiers who suck up to their superiors. When they give awards to those who are extinguished, make them tea, buy booze, wash their socks, underwear, and pay for it, and do not fight. I can't stand it. And once again, I again spoke in favor of awards. Everyone is awarded. All my merits are attributed to others, but not to me. He complained to his commander, but was transferred to an assault squad instead as punishment, so on and so forth. So you can go read the rest of that. But the idea here is just how rife with corruption the Russian army is. Just they're not interested in winning the war. They're interested in lining their own pockets and sending their men to unnecessary deaths or just killing them outright in order to monetary um, gain monetarily. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the case all across the front line for the Russians, but there are so very many of these accounts that you have to think that the problem is endemic, and there's just systematic corruption. Okay, here we have Andrew Perpetua's loss lists. We have a fairly significant list of Russian losses, but mainly made up of ATVs and civilian vehicles. There are a few tanks in there too. And for the Ukrainians, actually less today when you take out both surveillance and comms equipment and UGVs. I think you're going to see lots and lots of those on the list these days. And while it might be useful for some people to clock those, I think comparing them to a tank is, certainly in terms of value, interesting. There is an interesting debate to be had about functional value. So, would you rather have a tank in your unit, or I don't know, uh, 20 UGVs that are the same value as a tank? Or do you know what I mean? I don't know what the value difference is, but it might be that UGVs are more useful because they don't expend human lives. So anyway, let's now look at the Ukrainian losses to begin with. We've got electronic warfare system loss at the top, but generally surveillance and comms equipment, a bunch of UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles. We have a boat that's been destroyed, probably on the River Delta, Dnipro River Delta. Single piece of artillery, D-30 damaged. A couple of BMPs lost. Yeah, just usual stuff there. We've got BVS 10 Bandvarn 10, the articulated one from Sweden. One of those has been abandoned. And another damage. We've got a couple of NTLBs, so on and so forth. Some mobility vehicles, as per normal, Humvees, MRAPs, Max Pros, Kirpies, Cossacks, those sort of thing. Not not crazy amount of them, but still, 8 or so mobility vehicles, and then we're on to mainly civilian vehicles to end up there. So nothing too crazy, but it all, all of these losses hurt, of course, don't they? We shouldn't dismiss them. Um, for the Russians, we have a couple of pieces of electronic warfare equipment. Again, some UGVs too. A BM-21 Grad that is destroyed. I'll show you the video of that in a second. Some D20s and D30s, old bits of artillery, quite a few there. Quite a few of them destroyed, which is unusual. Usually you see them listed as damage because it's hard to tell what the damage is and how fundamental it is. We've got quite a few tanks, to be honest. There's 9 tanks, I think, there. One is a track guard and shed. Most of them are listed as tanks. So that's a pretty interesting ratio of 8-to-1 actually being used as tanks. Most of these abandoned and then hit by FPV drones. A couple of infantry fighting vehicles and mobility vehicles, and then you're down to the usual long list of motorcycles, quads, and um, golf buggies and whatnot, and then a whole bunch of civilian vehicles thereafter. So the Russians definitely using a lot of these unarmored vehicles in their attacks. Now, here is I'm going to try and not get the sound on this. Here is the BM-21 Grad that's taken out by a drone, but actually a series of drones, because you see at the beginning here, um, we have that BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket system, and then you've got a drone there going and hitting it, and then there's nothing left of it. This second drone, or a subsequent drone, is like that has been massively disassembled. So that first drone, I assume, exploded all of the rockets that were in there, because that, I'm sorry, has just fundamentally disassembled. Um, that is no more. It is pining for the fjords. Um, okay, Baba Yaga is working. A mine was dropped on a large Russian generator and fuel warehouse, which burned down in the Liman direction. The victims were the 423rd Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces. So Baba Yagas can cause, if you hit whatever you drop, if you drop, I guess, whatever it is, whether it's an FPV drone or whatever, if you hit the right thing at the right place, you get a big bang for your buck. Baba Yagas, though, are still causing problems for particularly the Russians, although the Russians are trying to develop their own Baba Yagas. They're bigger hexacopters, octocopters that can drop far greater payloads on the enemy. As you can see in the Liman direction, some success there for a Ukrainian Baba Yaga drone. Now, I'm just going to include this one. This is Playfar saying Solidar. So Solidar is just north of Bakhmut, and it's now a fair bit behind enemy territory, fair bit behind. Well, yeah, behind the front lines. Solidar just received very interesting info from the Russian side. Right now, there are 3 Ukrainian DRG soldiers 7 kilometers behind Russian lines next to Solidar and 2 kilometers behind their D30, so their howitzer positions. For now, so what's interesting there is the D30 howitzers are therefore 5 kilometers behind the front line. So they don't have a huge range, arguably. Depends how well maintained the barrels are. But yeah, for now, I confirmed heavily wounded Russian, uh, 1 heavily wounded Russian, and 1 possible wounded Ukrainian. The Russians have all been woken up and made to go on watch every 15 minutes on this Russian unit's lost rotation about a month ago, but in a different place, still in the Kramatorsk general direction. The exact same thing happened, but failed for the Ukrainians. The unit's commander says the DRG was eliminated fully, but this is unlikely at the moment. The situation is still unclear. I'll update you guys about the situation if any more info comes out, so on and so forth. But interesting that these deep reconnaissance groups do get behind front lines. In fact, there was Sorry to go down my list again here, but there was another claim concerning a DRG group. Here it is, a Russian DRG group that was eliminated. So these aren't many people each time. You heard about 3 Ukrainians 7 kilometers behind the line. Here we got, according to information from enemy resources, a sabotage and reconnaissance group from Alania was liquidated, the basis of which consists of mercenaries from north and south occupied Ossetia, so that's Georgia, but occupied Georgia. The details of this and the circumstances are unknown, says Max 25. And the translation of the Russian post is the tragic news that pierced the hearts of all fighters of the separate sabotage and reconnaissance detachment Alania fell on July the 30th. On this day, while carrying out a combat mission in the area, special military operation Death took 3 of our fearless comrades. So, yeah, 3 of these DRG behind the lines fighters were taken out there. So, yeah, both sides are going to be consistently throwing in their troops behind enemy lines to create sabotage or do reconnaissance or both. Okay, moving on to distant strikes. So 47 missiles and drones were sent into Ukrainian airspace, 29 of which were shot down. 1 ballistic missile, and so 17 drones managed to hit, I guess, in the areas that they were aiming at. In the eastern direction, it says here, according to Max 25, and 1 ballistic missile was able to hit as well as the fall of downed objects, so the debris coming down in 3 locations in the southern, and northeastern directions, but not too much to report. There is just one strike on a railway station that I'm going to talk about in a second, but just going to talk about general Shahid strikes. Ukrainian Mi-24 pictured here is pictured with 47 interceptions of Russian Shahid drones. That is very impressive. I've talked previously about how these are pretty effective at taking down Shahids. There just aren't nearly enough of them. The helicopters, that is. Ukraine already has interceptors for jet-powered Shahid drones, says no reports, according to the Center for Countering Disinformation. The head of the center, I presume that's Kovalenko, noted that despite rumors of all is lost, there are ongoing developments and updates will be shared at the right time. So there were claims that, well, the reality is that the Russians are using jet-powered Shahid drones now that can go considerably faster. I've seen various claims in the 500s, 500 kilometers an hour, but I've also seen up to 700 kilometers an hour. I'm not sure what the reality is. Probably the former. But all is not lost. You know, some people are dooming about these jet-powered drones. Well, actually, Sean Pinner wrote about Ukraine unveiling a jet-powered interceptor drone called the Mongoose to hunt down Shahids. According to Defender Media, it's a reusable drone with a jet engine and automatic homing system designed to approach strike drones and fire a shotgun-style charge at their engine or propeller. So top speed of 300 to 310 kilometers, max altitude of 5,000 meters, a combat radius of 12 kilometers, fast surgical response to loitering threats. So that's a jet powered interceptor, but I, what can it counter the jet Shahids if they are going a good 200 kilometers faster? I don't know, but that's been announced just recently. And actually, there was another one I saw. Oh, I'm going to have to go back to my thread, aren't I? I keep doing this. I didn't include these things, thinking, "Oh, I'm not going to talk about it." And then subsequently, I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about it." Here they are. So this is the Mongoose one that we were just mentioning. Reusable drone with a jet engine, automatic homing system, etc., etc. But there's another one uh, that is claimed to be jet powered. There, KB Technari presents a jet powered interceptor for Shahid drones, according to Militiani. Um, yeah, so the OP has a wrong picture. That could be the a wrong picture. That might not be the jet powered drone. That could be the actual picture, which should be that one. But anyway, point being, there's a bit of confusion there. Point being that they are bringing out um, jet powered interceptor drones to try and intercept jet powered Shahed drones. Now, the Shaheds are also adapting with regard to their munitions. Here we see apparently a Shahed with KTM-3 anti-tank mine cluster munitions. Currently, such ones have been spotted among the Shaheds group entering the borders of Sumy and Chernihiv region. So they're sending in um, cluster munitions on these drones. I wonder if that's, also that you shoot these down, then they fall to the ground and spread their cluster munitions. They're just dangerous either way. But that's, again, when they're flying over predominantly civilian infrastructure, it is going to be a war crime in the making. So yeah, so that's a drone flying over the Sumy or Chernihiv region. Okay, then there is this. I'm going to try and expand this. This is worth watching. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, assuming that the first one was actually the first, I assume that actually this person just got his camera out and probably missed the first view. And there may well have been more. But so therefore, there are at least 7 drones there in a bit of a swarm. I don't like using the word swarm because usually that's associated with kind of AI. Just a large group, a flight of a group of Shaheds over Ukraine. Where and when the video was shot is unknown, but um, that shows you the challenges that the Ukrainians have in shooting these down, moving fairly fast, and there's quite a lot of them, and that will overwhelm their defenses, no doubt. Now, the Ukrainians last night suffered in Lozova in Kharkiv Oblast as the Russians killed actually 2 and injured 4 rail workers and wounded 2 teens in a massive drone strike on Lozova. The attack hit homes, a school, a train station. Fires, blackouts, and rerouted trains followed. And here is the destruction caused to that train station. That's how it looks this morning. 2 people were killed there. And actually, Tim White says 10 injured, including 2 kids aged 13 and 14. So, really devastating damage to that nice looking railway station there. Lazova is what we would refer to as a town with a pre war population of around 50,000. However, it's the second largest city. I mean, I've had this conversation before, right at the early days of my channel, talking about what Ukrainians will call a village, a town, a city, and sometimes they call it a village, a city. I'm like, no, in the UK, village is tiny. The town is anything up to, you know, what most people would call cities in Ukraine. There, we would just call towns, and then cities are much larger, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. So this has a pre-war population of around 50,000. So I'd definitely call that a town. However, it's the second largest city, as they call it, in Kharkiv region, where it's located in the south near the border with Dnipropetrovsk. This seems to be a revenge attack for hitting uh, Russian railway stations. So the Russians getting some revenge potentially there. And as no report says, death toll has risen to 2. 9 people were injured. So one of those injured has now died, including children. 4 of the wounded remain hospitalized in moderate conditions. A lot of work to be done there to restore that train station. And then we go on to what the Ukrainians were up to last night, and most of what they're up to, I don't think we've got much of a clue, because as you can see from this image from last night, Visioner says at this moment, so this was, I don't know, a good, yeah, it would have, well, the time of where I am now, I'm trying to work out what time 4:15 in my local time is in uh, in Kiev or Moscow is difficult. So anyway, yesterday, at this moment, Ukrainian drones were carrying out massive attacks across Russia, targeting the regions of Kursk, Belgorod, Rostov, Krasnodar, Tula, Tver, Pskov, Saratov, and Moscow. Loud explosions being heard in several cities, including near the Taganrog air base in Rostov. But all we really know about is a train station getting hit in Rostov. So there's an awful lot of places listed there and not a lot of information. to be perfectly frank. This seems to be fairly typical at the moment. So fires broke out in Rostov region after a quote massive attack by Ukrainian armed forces. The results of this massive attack seem at the moment only to include the Tsinskaya railway station, which seems to have taken quite a hit. Another railway station in Russia's Rostov region. Earlier, says Tim White, I read about the region being under heavy attack from Ukraine drones, but it's emerged Tatsinskaya station, about 100 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, has been hit. Around 10 to 12 explosions were heard in Rostov, with the airbase at Milarovo targeted, but again, we don't know, along with the village of Balaya Kalitva. Ukraine may be trying to hit the train station there too. Power cuts in Milarovo. While this is another short video from Tatsinskaya station. And there you can see a lot more burnage going on. More from Tatsinskaya railway station. Russia sources claim that dozens of drones were shot down. Of course they do. So that's a pretty impressive, well, striking bit of video imagery there. Now, that's all we know at the moment. I'll just refresh my feed over here to see if there's anything else coming from um, out about strikes. I'll check that out in a second. Um, but what we do know concerning strikes from recent nights, particularly on the oil refineries and depots, is that the Ukrainians have had a great success in knackering Russian hydrocarbon output. So, primary oil processing at Russia's Novokuyibishevsk refinery has been halted. CDU 11, with a capacity of 18,900 metric tons per day, was hit. Ryazan oil refinery is halted. Around half of its refining capacity. Two units were stopped: CDU 3, 8,600 metric tons per day, and CDU 4, 11,400 tons per day. At the moment, the Ryazan refinery is operating only with CDU 6 at 23,200 tons per day, around 48% of its total capacity. What this has meant is Moscow Times reports, quote, there may be a shortage. Wholesale gasoline prices in Russia soar to historic high. It's not looking good there. Um, Here we have yet Evgeny Yistribin saying in Russia, gasoline prices have broken a new record after the attacks on Ryazan and Novokuyibishevsk refineries. Prices in conditions of a deficit that had already occurred earlier have shot up like a rocket, says Istribin, and provides a few graphs to give you some understanding. And then here we have JNQ saying the price of diesel in Russia is up over 7% in one day as Ukraine continues to hit Russian refineries. So they are definitely having some impact. Another bit of impact in Berdyansk, the occupied repair base on the territory of the former Berdyansk Zhnivarki plant was de energized. According to the GUR, equipment, weapons, and personnel of the Russian army were stored there. The final consequences of the explosion and the extent of the damage are being clarified still. So that was a strike on Berdyansk. I don't know exactly when that was. I'm just going to look for other information that might have come out. Yeah, no further battle damage assessment, to be honest, coming out of strikes from either side last night. So we'll go on to other bits and pieces. We'll continue talking about oil. Panama and the shipment thereof. Panama has barred the registration of oil tankers and bulk carriers older than 15 years, says Anton Gerashenko, to minimize the risk of detentions and prevent the entry of vessels from the shadow fleet. In addition, according to a statement by the Panama Maritime Authority, every 3 months, Panama will conduct extra compliance inspections for all ships sailing under the Panamanian flag. Panama is the world's second largest commercial ship registry. This marks a serious blow to the Kremlin's so-called shadow fleet, which has grown sixfold since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and now includes around 600 vessels. The average age of tankers transporting Russian oil in circumvention of sanctions is between 20 and 25 years, almost twice the global average for similar vessels, which is 13 years, according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. At least one third of these tankers are over 20 years old. These are often ships that were meant to be scrapped but were instead bought up by Russian companies from Western owners, particularly Greek ship owners. Most of these tankers lack standard P&I protection and indemnity insurance, making them even more hazardous. In June, CREA estimated that 435 tankers were used to export oil from Russian ports. 153 of them were part of the shadow fleet. Now, some of these vessels may lose the right to sail under the world's most sought after flag, Panama. Um, and then we have India has responded to Trump regarding the purchase of Russian oil. So India was threatened by Trump very publicly on Truth Social, because that's where he does all of his diplomacy, with regard to them continuing to buy Russian oil. It's good to hear that Trump is going after secondary sanctions now and trying to put pressure on these countries. Now, whether he's doing this as an excuse really to get embroiled in a tariff war with these countries, I don't know. But it's certainly, I think, helping Ukraine out. They don't understand. So, India, though, and they've got a pretty good comeback here, they don't understand why they're not allowed to buy Russian oil while the US and the EU continue trading with Russia. So they're saying, hey, hang on, to Quokwe here, like, you too, like, you can't say we can't do this, and yet you continue to do so. Um, Now, Russia, on the other hand, is clearly rattled against criticizing US plans to hit India and other buyers of Russian oil with extra tariffs. Meanwhile, Zelensky's number two, Andriy Yermak, shows good timing to remind us that India is also helping drone production, though in fairness, many Western components are used too. So at this time where India is in the crosshairs, Andriy Yermak comes out with a post that says Ukraine has flagged Indian-made parts in drones used by Russian forces. Ukrainian authorities established that electronic components from Vishay Intertechnology and aerospace and whatever the company is, so on and so forth. That's from the Hindustan Times. Uh, there are Indian parts in these Russian drones, and he's posting that at a fairly opportune time when there is some pretty fraught discussions between India and the US concerning India's support of Russia there. So, Russian auto giant Kamaz has posted a record um, loss, in the first 6 months of 2025. The concern's net loss amounted to 218 million euros compared to 36 million euros the previous year. From August the 1st, Kamaz switched to a 4-day work week due to a 30% drop in sales. Employees agreed to salary cuts in exchange for job retention. Again, you've got four vehicle producers in dire straits at the moment in Russia. We're then going to go on to something I did report, I think it was yesterday, day before. The Ukrainians had seized a whole trove of Russian nuclear submarine secrets. They'd hacked some documents that I said would be super useful to the Americans. I'm sure you could swap this for some Patriot launchers. Anyway, a little bit more information here coming from Sunder. Ukraine's defense intelligence has seized a massive trove of Russian nuclear submarine secrets. Ukraine's HUI intelligence agency says it obtained documents on the Knyaz Pozharsky, Russia's newest Bore A class submarine, revealing its design, full crew lists, combat manuals, and even vulnerabilities. These files detail everything from the missile systems to daily ship routines. The Knyaz Pozharsky, recently commissioned with Vladimir Putin present, is part of Russia's northern fleet based in Gadjievo. Um, Knyaz Pozharsky is a Bore-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine designed as part of Russia's nuclear triad. It carries the RSM-56 Bulava submarine-launched ballistic missile, a weapon deployed since 2019 and developed for the Russian Navy as a core element of the country's nuclear deterrence structure, including names of crew members, roles, qualifications, and their physical training levels. This trove also features combat instructions, orders posted in cabins and compartments, and logs regulating daily routines, combat duties aboard the submarine. So you get stuff like combat instructions for the submarine's steering and navigation units, official inspection report of submarine components issued in Gadjievo, organizational structure here on the right, and combat layout charts of the Knyaz Pozharsky crew, and then some translations of those pictures. That Ukraine stole its plans may come in handy when Tsar Putin is jailed and Zelensky takes over the Kremlin. Meanwhile, the planned commissioning of the Pozharsky, the newest Borei A class nuclear powered ballistic submarine, is detailed there in armyrecognition.com. So you can go and find out more details on and more documents from the Trove by following the links. They will be posted below. Fascinating, though, and that's going to be very useful for a number of Ukraine's allies. Czech President Petr Pavel says, quote, right now, and it's not for the first time he said this, right now, when we talk about the prospect of the future outcome of this war, we believe that on the one hand, it is still necessary to support Ukraine militarily, but this war cannot be won on the battlefield. A much more powerful tool is now the financial, economic, and other measures that we, the USA and Europe, can apply together. And I believe that is clearly in the interest of both sides of the Atlantic to exert much greater economic pressure on Russia, because that's the set of measures that doesn't kill. I believe that with the state of the Russian economy today, they cannot stand economic pressure for a long time. That's why sooner or later, if these measures are applied, Russia would have no other alternative than to sit down at the table and negotiate what they were in fact rejecting up to now. So it's about the economic pressure, about sanctions, about all of the levers that allies of Ukraine can pull without military assistance. And I totally agree with this. Still give military assistance, still help Ukraine as much as possible on the battlefield, but the damage to Russia is going to be done economically and is being done. But that needs, Trump had a choice on the 20th of January, and he made the wrong choice. And he's getting there now 6 months later. But you do not give a medal to the person that comes last in the race, especially if they throw the race on purpose. They, on purpose, took the wrong turn in the cross country race right at the beginning. And they end up finishing. Well done, you finished, but you came last and you made the wrong choice right at the beginning. Do we congratulate you? Do we give you a medal? No, we don't. We say, bloody hell, you're a bit crap. If you really want to be winning the cross country race, you want to be running better than that. You want to be operating better than that. So, do not congratulate Trump on eventually getting there. There's no medal for that. John Sweeney, who I've interviewed, go and check that out on my live tab, says, good observation to Michael Weiss. Michael Weiss saying Russian war machine is new. What's he talking about? Well, Donald Trump said this, and this is the India issue he had. India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchase, selling it on the open market for big profits, which is true. They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by this Russian war machine. Wow. So he's now using rhetoric that I think is a step change away from what he has previously been using. Because of this, I'll be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, it could be that someone new is writing his tweets, his Truth Social posts. I don't know, but there is a chat. I mean, he doesn't write these. He doesn't have time he doesn't have the time or even knowledge of the words to write most of these. I'm pretty sure. So Russian war machine is hard for Trump to row back on, says John Sweeney. He still has done nothing serious to screw over the Kremlin, but this new rhetoric will be causing anxiety in the high red castle on the river Moskva. So it is good news to hear some of that rhetoric, that's for sure. Now, journalists from Jeune Afrique, Young Africa, infiltrated a private Telegram channel run by Russian Wagner Group, revealing hundreds of videos of photos of executions, of rape, torture, mutilations, and executions that were filmed and shared by the perpetrators themselves, says Philip Abaji Jr. You can go and check out my interview of Philip Abaji Jr. as well. I'm going to try and release some of my interviews again, as I did with my first Kaylin Robertson one while I'm away. This is in French, this particular source, but that's an interesting infiltration there, showing just how decrepit and disgusting Wagner, the PMC, the mercenaries are, the Russians, and what they do in Africa to maintain power and to extract and exploit in the areas in which they operate. I reported yesterday that maybe a hand grenade went off in a building in Lviv, As Tim White says here, an important update to a story from yesterday. Police in Lviv now say it was not a hand grenade that exploded, but a battery in an e-scooter. One of my boys wants an e-scooter. I'd be like, no, 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 no. I'm just gonna claim it'll just explode. No, they all explode. 6 people remain in hospital with burns and smoke fumes and inhalation. So yeah, that was not a hand grenade. Anyway, I just thought I'd update that. Crimea is packed to the brim. Hotel occupancy reaches 96 to 98%. Tour operators report. The most popular destinations are Yalta and Alshta, accounting for over 60% of the total flow. So this is in response to there being a 35-kilometer long record traffic jam going into Crimea, and that apparently both sides. So this is on the way into Crimea and probably further down on the way out of Crimea, because they are checking at the well, not the border. They're checking before, I presume, you get onto the bridge for safety reasons. Another 20% of tourists chose Feodosia and Koktebel, while the rest go to Sevastopol and Yevpatoria. Tourism, fueled by Russians stealing Ukrainian properties and cheap subsidized holidays by the state to reinforce the erasure of Ukrainians from Crimea, has increased by 20 to 25% compared to last year, and the season promises to be record breaking. However, the traffic jam on the Crimean Bridge has already set its own anti record, 35 kilometers on both sides, and the threat of drone strikes looms large every hour. So they are not just continuing to go on holiday to Crimea, but then more of them are going on holiday to Crimea, even though it's in a war zone and getting hit regularly every night. I'm sure there is some strike on Crimea. Just incredible. But of course, nothing like a cheap holiday, even if it's in a war zone. Now, talking about holidays, just to prove that I am not at home, here's me and the missus having a meal last night. And look, there's me in a wheelchair. Um, yeah, walking's been difficult. I'm pretty sure I've got COVID. Anyway, uh, enough whinging for me. Hope you guys are all right. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.